Zervas certainly had a means of contact with the Germans. He had at least a couple of officers who were members of MS, stationed quietly in Yanina, which was General Lanz's headquarters, General Lanz being the German commander, and these officers were certainly in irregular contact with Lanz and with Lanz's staff.
The war in Europe still had over a year to run. In Greece, a truce was arranged in January 1944 between the two resistance groups. Meanwhile, Hellas had begun to organize society in the territory it had liberated. In April, it set up a provisional government in the mountains. Elections were held, and women were given the vote for the first time.
I remember that the government made beautiful things happen, and we were raised to a higher level. The other governments had neglected the peasants. Beautiful things happened, like voting. I voted, and we helped in the local government in any way we could.
Η αλληλοεξάρτηση και η κατανόηση που είχε δημιουργηθεί.
The solidarity and understanding that were generated up here in the mountains and the enthusiasm for self-government made people so much more aware and sophisticated that those of us who came up from Athens just couldn't believe it.
Στην Αθήνα και βρισκόταν σε αυτό το κλίμα, τα έχανε. Και τότε δημιούργησαν, να πούμε, τα λαϊκά δικαστήρια στα χωριά.
People's courts were set up in the villages, and I was selected to be a people's judge.
Βάλανε και με ένα δικαστήριο λαϊκό. Και κάναμε να πούμε τις διάφορες.
We judge various cases, things like property, mainly small cases, no murders or anything. I did my duty as I have been chosen, and I became a judge. Although I was illiterate, of course. There were no lawyers here in the mountains. I don't know what was happening in the towns. Here in the villages, we didn't have to pay anyone acting as a lawyer. We only had people's judges who judged according to their consciences.
In general, the people were very pleased with this people's government. We had general assemblies every month, and every villager could air his grievances and criticize the chairman or councillor when he didn't do his duty. We made decisions for the whole village. Whatever happened in the village, everyone had to know about it. That was how self-government worked.
When we started to govern ourselves, we got encouraged, and people woke up, so to speak. We became more active and took more responsibility for ourselves.
We wanted this government to agree to the separation of church and state, and that priests should complete secondary school and have theological degrees. In the meantime, we joined the resistance, and the churches contributed however they could.
Together, and the partisans respected the female sex. They had a lot of respect for us.
In April 1944, Greek troops in the British Army in Egypt mutinied in support of this provisional government. Churchill instructed the British commander to put down mutiny. After 10 days without water, the Greeks surrendered, and the British sent 8,000 of them off to prison camps in Sudan, Egypt, and Libya. The British then hastily arranged a conference in Lebanon, at which they hoped to set up a national government acceptable to Eyam Elas. The conference was a success. The British nominated the Liberal politician George Papandreou to be Prime Minister, and then the delegation from the provisional government in the mountain agreed to a coalition government under him, in which they would have 6 out of 24 seats. The British were very optimistic, but in Greece the news was greeted with dismay by the Hellas partisans, who now controlled 4/5 of their country.
Υπέρ στο Λίβανο, αναγνωρίζοντας τα κόμματα τα οποία δεν διέθεταν παρά μονάχα μια, πώς να το πούμε, παλιά.
Our delegation signed the Lebanon Agreement, which gave authority to the old political parties when they had no power in Greece at all.
Να συμμετάσχουν με 6 υπουργούς.
By then, EAM was the most powerful political force. And yet, the delegation agreed to participate in a government where they only had 6 out of 24 seats. That was the first step in the downfall of our movement.
Although the conference was judged a success, the British were still worried about the extent of EAM Hellas's power. In August, Churchill wrote, "It is most desirable to strike out of the blue without any preliminary crises. It is the best way to forestall EAM." In October 1944, he went to Moscow to firm up Allied plans for post-war Europe. With Stalin, he made what became known as the Percentage Agreement, giving Britain 90% influence in Greece in exchange for the Soviet Union having 90% influence in Romania. In good humor, Churchill tells Stalin, "It's a pity God did not seek our opinion when he built the world." To which Stalin replied, "This was God's first mistake." In Greece, as liberation approached, tension mounted between Hellas and the British. One bone of contention was the British attitude to Greek collaborators who had worked with German security forces.
Our attitude was, and we met them before the Germans left, to say if they did not surrender their arms and surrender themselves, they would be arrested and tried as collaborators. We did our best to get them to surrender.
Και αρχίζοντας τις διαπραγματεύσεις, εμείς πιέζαμε τους...
When we started the negotiations, we were putting pressure on Michalagas and the others who could see that there was no way out of surrendering their arms. At that moment, the English officer intervened and said, "You surrender your arms if you want to, or if you don't want to, you don't have to." The negotiations came to an end, and we realized that the Englishmen had turned the tables on us, and so the collaborators didn't surrender their arms.
We failed, I think, because they feared we were too few in number to protect them from Hellas. Hellas would have allowed us to take their surrender if they, Hellas, had taken their arms. In the event they did not surrender, in the event they should have been arrested as collaborators. I think about that time, the attitude of Hellas to us did begin to change. I suppose a single incident brought home to me the change of attitude when Ypsilantis, then a very senior Hellas commander, made what was one of the great Greek gestures of contempt when he tugged his lapel in referring to British troops, which is one of the most contemptuous gestures in the very rich Greek vocabulary of gesture. It surprised me then, it surprised me now, it surprises me now, and I think the only reason one can give is that Hellas began to see that the British, who were expected to come in to the Peloponnese in Italy, could be a factor, an obstacle to their intention of taking a power.
They usually accuse Hellas of wanting to seize power. It's a stupid view. There was a power vacuum in Greece. There were occupying forces and quisling prime ministers, but the Greek people didn't recognize their governments.
Αλλά ο λαός δεν αναγνώριζε αυτούς ως κυβερνήτες.
People were creating their own popular power in their own right through the resistance.
Απελευθερώνοντας τις περιοχές, δημιουργούσε τη δική του.
EAM didn't try to take power. EAM had power.
EAM την είχε την εξουσία.
I have no doubt at all that they could have occupied Athens at the time when the Germans left, and they could have made it very difficult for Allied forces to return to Greece without having to face an opposed landing.
In October 1944, 4 months after D-Day, with the Allies on the offensive throughout Europe, the Germans were forced to pull out of Greece, and the British entered unopposed. The swastika came down from the Acropolis, and in spite of some misgivings, all Greeks welcomed the British troops.
When we got to Athens itself, we hadn't actually seen a German, and we were treated as though we were conquering heroes. And across the roads there were banners saying "Hip hip the British troops." There were posters and streamers from the trees. The walls were marked with welcoming signs. And as we walked along the streets, we were cheered, we were hugged. Sometimes we kissed. People came up and gave us flowers.
These were days of enthusiasm and joy. We poured onto the streets, and when we saw the English for the first time, in the tanks, in the vehicles, our joy was such that I remember feeling that they were my brothers, my friends, liberators. I trusted them. I remember we danced together. I don't know whether we were dancing English or Greek dances, but we were dancing and kissing.
But within 6 weeks, the British were in armed combat with Hellas and its reservists in Athens. It had been agreed that a new Greek army would be formed, and the argument was over who was going to be in it. For the British, the question was how to disarm Hellas. And for Hellas, it was how to retain its military power on at least an equal footing with the royalist Greek troops then returning from Italy.
I can remember them marching down the main street of Athens, and our great relief that the last Greek troops come in, and that we were not the only people responsible. This was a turning point. Of course, in a way, you might say that for the communists participating in the government might be regarded as a little bit provocative, in the sense that they realized that the head of their government in which they were participating was bringing his army in.
The British and the Greek governments, along with the royalist troops, wanted to restore the old order in Greece.
Να επαναφέρουν στη Λέα την παλιά τάξη πραγμάτων, να ξαναβενιάσουν το βασιλιά ξανά την εξουσία.
They wanted the king to on his throne, because he was the best guarantee of British interest in Greece, political, economic and strategic.
Των οικονομικών και των στρατηγικών των εγκλήσεων στην Ελλάδα.
Churchill was adamant in his support of the king's return, and wrote to Eden that having paid the price we have to Russia for freedom of action in Greece, we should not hesitate to use British troops to support the Royal Hellenic government. I fully expect a clash with Eam, and we must not shrink from it, provided the ground is well chosen. Negotiations between the Greek government and Hellas about the composition of the new army continued with bad faith from both sides. On December the 2nd, the Prime Minister Sir George Papandreou banned an Eam demonstration against his demobilization plans. The Eam ministers in the government resigned, and the demonstration went ahead. It was to end in tragedy.
About 2 minutes past 7. The police suddenly opened fire on them. They killed 11 or 12 people altogether. The man called Frank Putnam, who's a British policeman, whose job it was to help to train the new Greek police forces being set up, went along in front of police and kicked their guns up to stop the firing at the crowd. They were not firing over the head of the crowd, they were firing into the crowd.
Και ξαφνικά εκεί που βρισκόμαστε
And suddenly, as we were in Constitution Square, we heard for a moment the machine guns,
η πρώτη νεκρή.
and that was dead.
Εγώ φυσικά έτρεξα να φωτογραφίσω.
I went to take photographs,
Αλλά
but I didn't know what was happening.
δηλαδή γιατί
I mean, who were these people killed and by whom? What was happening?
συνέβαινε. Μετά μέσα σε
Later,
δευτερόλεπτα
within seconds,
μαζεύτηκε
people gathered and held
γονατίσανε
and started to sing the funeral march with fists high up in the air.
μονέλες απάνω.
On December the 4th, Hellas attacked the police stations. On the 5th, Churchill instructed General Scobie, "Do not hesitate to act as if you were in a conquered city, where a local rebellion is in progress. We have to hold and dominate Athens, with bloodshed if necessary." The following day, the British came in on the side of the Greek government. British troops seized the headquarters of EAM, and from then on, it was open warfare between the British and Hellas.
Αυτοί προσπάθησαν να εμποδίσουν.
They tried to stop us taking action against the security battalions who collaborated with the Nazis.
Συνεργαζόμενων με τα στρατεύματα κατοχής.
Men who the British first regarded as enemies and then later as their allies.
Και μετά κάναμε συμμάχους.
Μετά το Αγίου Νικολάου στις 6 του Δεκέμβρη.
Later, on the 6th of December, I was at the Makrigiannis battle.
Η μάχη του Μακρυγιάννη. Αλλά για μένα η μάχη του Μακρυγιάννη.
For me, the battle was an experience, a school, a university.
Και τότε κατάλαβα για πρώτη φορά τι φανατισμός.
For the first time, I understood what fanaticism meant. Rational thinking stopped. Man is beyond himself. He cannot think, cannot function rationally.
In the next few weeks, over 4,000 civilians were to die. In the House of Commons, Churchill faced a bit of censure for his actions in Greece. Justifying British armed intervention, he claimed that Hellas had planned to march down upon Athens and seize it by armed force, and it would have been incompatible with British honour to lead Athens to anarchy and misery, followed by tyranny established murder. While the arguments went on in London, the battle for Athens continued. The bulk of Hellas was in northern Greece, fighting the royalist Zervas, who had to be rescued by the British and evacuated Corfu. There were only 3 Hellas units in Athens. A week into the battle, the communist leadership was still undecided about what action to take, and stopped short of ordering all-out attack against the British troops. Nevertheless, 25,000 reinforcements were sent in, and by December the 15th, the British had more than 50,000 troops in Athens.
In Italy, or in any other theatre of war, if you saw a German, you shot at him. I mean, you did your best to kill him. If he saw you, he did his best to kill you. In Greece, we were a bit ambiguous about this, and so were they, I'm glad to say, as it turned out. Well, I thought we'd come to liberate the Greeks. But within what seemed to be a short space of time, we were actually killing them. And more to the point, actually, British chaps were dying in a cause that I couldn't quite understand.
I think what most of us felt was that we did like the idea of fighting against people who were on our side. It wasn't what we'd enlisted for. We would do anything we were told to do, but it wasn't a welcome idea. The Greeks were on our side. They'd fought beside us in Italy.
As the British stepped up their attack, civilian casualties mounted.
Στις 12 του Δεκέμβρη μας φώναξαν με τα χωνιά την εποχή.
On the 12th of December, the Communist Party called us to a meeting in a school in Kypseli.
Συζητήσουμε και να πάρουμε.
We were to decide what line to take and whether to join in the fighting.
Ήξερα ήδη ότι υπήρχαν οι
I knew the British were involved, but I hadn't seen them in action until that day when they fired at us with rockets.
Εκείνη τη μέρα μας χτύπησαν. Μας χτύπησαν οι Άγγλοι.
10 people were killed, mainly students and actors, and 12 of us were seriously wounded, including myself.
Μεταξύ των οποίων ήμουν και εγώ, πολύ βαριά.
Elas began to take hostages and shot many civilians whom they accused, often wrongly, of being collaborators. The British already begun sweeping operations and took their prisoners to the prisoner of war camp at El Daba in Africa.
Εγώ το βράδυ γυρίζοντας στο σπίτι πιάστηκα.
On my return home in the evening I was captured.
Λέγω λεπτομέρειες.
Without going into the details, I was caught and sent to Africa.
Στην Ελντάμπα.
I found myself at El Daba. We were 28,000 of us there, surrounded by barbed wire.
Σε αυτή την ροή που βρεθήκαμε στην Ελντάμπα.
Among the mass of people in El Daba, there were all kinds of people. Most of them were not related to our movement. They did not belong to EAM. Let me tell you about a neighbor of mine who was a milkman. He kept chickens in his yard. This man never got involved in anything in his life. One day his chickens got out and he tried to fetch them back in. A detachment happened to be passing by. Found him outside and picked him up as well.
Allies that they may have been, but the Americans in Athens made a point of distancing themselves from British actions.
The American ambassador, Lincoln McVeigh, who had moved in and occupied the quarters of the United Library, which belonged to the American Archaeological School. He was in there when some British soldiers came in and, very thirsty, fighting, tried to pour water from the well. He ordered them out in no certain terms and said, "We're neutral, get out." See, that was the attitude of the Americans, this extraordinary thing.
At home, there was an outcry in press against the action of British troops in Athens. It was led by the Times newspaper.
It so happened that I had the occasion to lunch with Robin Harrington Ward, who was then the editor of the Times, and I did my best to explain to him my experience and how I tried to explain what had taken place in Greece. He was quite impervious to anything that I had to say. He was totally and entirely sympathetic to the Elas position, and he thought that Churchill had gone completely off his head.
In the House of Commons, Churchill said, "There is no case in my experience, or at least wartime experience, where the British government has been so maligned and its motives so traduced in our own country by important organs of the press or among our own people." He defended his action by claiming that for 3 or 4 days or more, it was a struggle to prevent a hideous massacre in the center of Athens, in which all forms of government would have been swept away and naked, triumphant Trotskyism installed.
I suppose there must have been 40 to 50 men and women who were involved in final policy decisions on this. A dozen or so responsible British and American newspapers. They were very well informed, very intelligent, and at that moment in the war, they were enormously motivated to support Churchill's policy if they possibly could. Now, you've got two alternatives. Either one, Churchill was wrong on this business, or else 40 to 50 well-informed, well-motivated men and women, all at the same moment and on the same issue, all took leave of their senses and regarded Churchill as being wrong when he was really right. Well, I mean, the saying is, you can pay your money and you can take your Tories.
On December the 18th, the Royal Air Force headquarters in Athens was attacked and overrun by Elas.
2 o'clock one morning. Surrender, comrades! We'd waken up much better than the alarm clock. There were a few shouts, and there we were, I presume, at war. We dressed, went downstairs to where the rest of the chaps were, and more or less sat about talking about what was happening. No one really knew, except that we were being fired at.
And suddenly there was, like noise, become a Venetian blind going up and down. Several times then, everything quietly, while later, bang! And the shell came up to the Venetian blinds at the window and went into the wall, way over to my right, and burst in the wall, luckily. Or it wouldn't be here now.
With RAF personnel now Elas prisoners, Churchill flew up to Greece with Eden on Christmas Eve. He met with resistance leaders and Greek government ministers for 2 days. The outcome of the meetings was that a regency was set up under Archbishop Damaskinos. Churchill was finally persuaded that the king could not be before a referendum. Meanwhile, the fighting went on, with aerial superiority